Hi, it's Mike Reese. I've been writing for The Simpsons for 30 years. I ran the show in seasons 3 and 4. I created The Critic. And now I've written a book. It's called Springfield Confidential, and it is the first insider's look at The Simpsons. It's filled with secrets, scandals, and tales of censorship and celebrities. It's a great book. It's like a Simpsons episode. It's fast, it's smart, and it's packed with hundreds of jokes, some of them funny. Please buy Springfield Confidential. You can order it now on Amazon.com.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as Mr. Most Days Off, and today we are about to do some clowning around, but it won't just be me. Joining me, as always, your co-host with the most, Richie the Whiz Kid. How you doing today, Rich?
I'm good, man. As everyone knows, clowns, particularly like the crusty aspect of clowns, is one of my least favorite things in The Simpsons, so I'm interested to see how this episode goes. But no, in all honesty, I absolutely love this episode. We'll have a little bit to talk about in that regard, but I won't waste any more time than I have to. I'll go ahead and throw it back to you, the man, the myth, the clown college. It is Miles.
And if two clowns is funny, what's even better than that? We've got a third clown joining us today. It's Toph from the Gravity Beard podcast. How you doing today, Toph?
I am fantastic and super thrilled to be here.
Oh, well, welcome to the show, sir. We are very excited to have you on today. I know you are a longtime Simpsons fan, and we're going to talk about that. But first, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do over there at the Gravity Beard podcast.
Yes, so a couple months ago, we passed 2 years. The show is called Gravity Beard. It might be more accurate to say that the feed is called Gravity Beard. We do a number of things there. So it originally was a variety show, which it still is. You know, every other week you don't really know what we're going to do, and a lot of times we don't either. But then in the alternating weeks, sometime along the way, we established a show called This Week Today that I host with a good friend of mine.
Lord Saunders, I do believe. Shout out to him, right?
Yes. Shout out to Adam Lord Saunders. And so he and I are good buddies, and so we got that started some time back. I guess we're around episode 30 or 31 or 2 or somewhere like that. And then we've done other projects there. We did the Blunder Dogs, which was an indie pod blooper show that we did for 2 seasons. I don't know.
You should have hit us up for some footage and material on that one. We have plenty in the banks.
Oh, well, you know, we did 2 seasons of it. I did that project with Nick and Phil from My Thing Can Beat Your Thing.
Oh yeah, I love those guys.
Yeah, those guys are terrific. And so I don't know if we'll do any more of that. You know, maybe we will. We kind of put it on the shelf for now. And then I guess that's, you know, we've done a number of other things. We just started doing hotline minisodes. We set up a phone hotline for people to call in, and that has been a place for listeners and fans of the show to call in and leave crazy messages. So we've got reoccurring characters and bits that have all been generated by listeners.
I know you've got the intern program going on Facebook as well, right? For a place for your fans to commune together.
That is correct. So back in May, we started the Gravity Beard Interns, our show Facebook group, and just threw a bunch of friends from all different time periods and places that we knew. And so it's just been a stew of absurdity. Everybody's kind of, it's really taken on a life of its own. So just like the hotline, which is largely stuff curated from listeners who have called in, the Facebook group is the same. They've some of them have actually taken on titles and roles all to themselves. we my friend Corey has taken on the title of Science McSciencey Face. And,
very official.
Yeah, so
I would trust somebody's opinion if their name were Science McSciencey Face.
I don't know. I feel like they need a doctor in front of that.
Well, if you want to call him Dr. Sciencey McScience Face, I'm sure he'd be happy to let you do that. And he's just a friend of mine that I know that jumped into the group. And then Keith Galla from the Pop-Up Filmcast, he's taken on the role of art, literature, and what is it? Music, art, and literature. And then there's several others, and so it's been really fun. Yeah, it's like I said, it's taken on a life of its own. And then I think the only other thing that we're real involved in is the Underdog podcast community on Facebook, which I guess we started maybe about a little over a year ago. And that was a group that we set up exclusively for indie podcasters, which it's grown to almost 2,000 people, listeners and shows.
Wow.
So, there's a ton of terrific groups on Facebook, as you guys know, for podcasters. But at the time, there wasn't one specifically just for indie podcasters and nothing else. And so we set that up, and it's been a lot of fun. I think it's a place where show creators and fans can gather and exchange information, encourage each other, and just have a good time with that.
Yeah, it's such a great quality that the podcast community in general has, is just how supportive other shows can be. I know just anytime we've had a problem, we've even just gone on Twitter and been like, hey, all of you podcasters out there, what do you do when you have this happen? And instantly just have tons of people responding and helping. And you build these networks and communities together. And it's a wonderful, wonderful aspect of podcasting that was kind of a surprise getting into the project. I mean, I didn't think it was going to necessarily be like a dog-eat-dog type of environment, but at the same time, just the willingness and eagerness of people to help you out it's really humbling in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so I've heard you guys mention that, and I would agree, and I've heard a bunch of other podcasters say the same, that I think a lot of people thought, I'm going to do this podcast, and it's going to be kind of this isolating hobby that I'm just going to do for my own sake, and their biggest pleasant surprise is the podcast community.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you would think just, as we sit here, we're all independently in a room by ourselves talking into a microphone. So like you said, that could be a very isolating experience. However, it opens doors to the rest of this virtual world that is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
But you're very right. The idea that it would be isolating, I think that's funny, just because like in a lot of ways it totally is, but in so many it is not. But another internet society that kind of brings a lot of people in our world together is the Simpsons themselves. And a big reason you're here is because you're a fan of the show. And tell us a little bit about how that started. How old were you when you started watching the Simpsons? What are some of your earliest memories of being a Simpsons fan?
I've actually been around The Simpsons since the beginning of The Simpsons. I don't remember. I don't think I watched them when they were shorts on the Tracy Ullman show, and I don't even remember when that started, if it was 87, 88, somewhere in there, because the show itself, I think, started in 89. Is that right?
The Ullman shorts were in 87, or that's when they started, and the very first episode of The Simpsons was December of 89, and that was the only episode that was in the 80s. Everything else was 1990
and so
on.
I don't have a specific memory of being in front of the television for that very first episode, so I can't say that. I can't claim that. But I was 15 at the time when the show debuted, and I've been watching it ever since. I mean, I remember, like a lot of people do, how the animation was distinctly different. The character voices sounded different, and then it kind of evolved after a season or two into a lot more like what it is today. Even now, it's been 30 seasons, so even the voices have changed even more over the years as the different actors have gotten older. But people that have followed the show that long have noticed that. But yeah, I was there from the very, very beginning. And I don't even remember, a lot of people that are in my position or that say they've watched it since that time, have stories about how they had to sneak to watch it because their parents maybe, it was edgy television at the time. Everything on Fox, Fox was, you guys have covered this, Fox was established on shows like The Simpsons and Married with Children, and it was all really edgy television. But now in context, it's not at all, because now you've got Family Guy and South Park and a lot of other things that came after The Simpsons that The Simpsons inspired. Even like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia would push the edge a lot more than Married with Children ever did. But at the time, it was way there wasn't that type of edginess on network television at the time, especially a cartoon that was geared towards, I guess you could say, geared towards children. I mean, it appealed to children. They sold a lot of merchandise to children.
I think that it wasn't necessarily the plan, but it definitely turned into what it became about, because Bart Mania was a big thing.
Exactly.
In like 1992. That kid was on everything.
Right. And so,
lunchboxes, mugs, backpacks, pencil boxes, anything that you could take to school, he was on.
Yeah. Well, because what is he supposed to be? Maybe a third grader in the show? Fourth grader?
Fourth grader. He's 10 years old.
Yeah. And so if you were around that age, you wanted to be Bart Simpson. So I don't have a memory of having to sneak away to watch The Simpsons. I just watched it.
Sure. And you were a teenager at the time, so that was probably a little bit more appropriate viewing, honestly. You probably were very much in the target demographic of what they were really shooting for in terms of the comedy and the writing. But for the sneaking around aspect, Richie and I were 4 and 5 when the show 4 or 5 when the show first started. So for us, we have some pretty early memories of watching somewhere around like 7 or 6 or 7 or somewhere in that range. And definitely at that time, there were the kids at school that could watch The Simpsons, and then there was the kids at school that couldn't watch The Simpsons.
Suckers.
And, that went on. Yeah, no joke, right? And that went on throughout probably middle school before it was finally like, yeah, it's just The Simpsons, whatever. It's not South Park.
Right. Well, and I want to say this, not to take too much of a tangent, but I don't think there's two better guys to take on the responsibility of doing a podcast episode by episode of this legendary show than you guys.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Wow. I do. I think you're the perfect guys to do it. When I listen to your show, and you can't say this, there's a lot of very good indie podcasts out there. There's a lot of people that have full-time jobs doing podcasting that are doing an excellent job of putting out excellent material. But there's a few that are even that next layer higher where you would say, this sounds like a pro podcast. Not that we do everything perfectly, but it's the right guys with the right chemistry, putting out the right content on the right topic. And if this was an NPR show or a, whatever, and I think your show, it fits that category. I think it's that well executed.
Holy shit, man. I haven't cried this hard since I watched In Maggie Makes 3. Like, seriously.
No, I'm serious. And I'm not just saying this. I mean, I finally have the opportunity to tell you myself because I'm on the show, but I've thought this for a while. I thought you guys are executing it. And you've heard other shows that cover TV shows, episode by episode, and some of them aren't that great. Some of them are fine. But I think yours is really top quality.
Wow, we that
way to make our heads even bigger.
No, thank you. That really means a lot, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
Really, really, really cool to hear. So, thank you.
I always knew me and Miles had chemistry.
We've got to get this back on track to the actual Simpsons, though, and I want to talk more about you, sir. So, you're 15 years old, then you're in high school. What is the buzz for your age demographic at that time? What is the buzz at school? Is this something that you had to see each week? Is this something that you were like on the outside looking in if you missed out, or was it just kind of a casual thing at that time?
No, I don't think so because that was right at the beginning of high school, freshman high school. So that's when things kind of are frozen in time. That's the music and movies and everything that kind of defines that. When you think back of it, it still feels current. And
yeah,
and this is part of that time. It's part of that time capsule, and that carried right into college. Because when you go to college, your folks aren't around. You can do what you want, and watch what you want, and spend time on what you want. And we continue to watch it for several more years. And around the same time, so I don't know what y'all's opinion is, but maybe The Simpsons hit its stride in 92, 93, somewhere in there. And that's also when when other things in pop culture that were happening was you were in the middle of the grunge era. That's when Letterman moved over to CBS. That's when Conan came onto the scene. And these were all things that were all kind of all part of that. And so The Simpsons was right in the middle of it. And we all talked about it. We all laughed about it because I think at the age of 15 or 16 and then a couple of years later, that's when you're straddling both sides of material like this. There's a lot of cartoons that appeal to adults who get the adult jokes, and the other ones who, and then on the other side, the kids that just take it as a cartoon and they just think it's funny because people are hitting each other on the head. But at the age of 15 or 16, that's when you start appreciating both. And that's when you really get the most out of The Simpsons is you like that it's a cartoon, kind of that kid appeal, but you're starting to get the adult jokes that are aimed at the adults.
Well, not only the humor, but I think also the heart of the show. And that's another big thing that we do talk about fairly often on this podcast, about how much differently a lot of these episodes will affect us as a kid versus as an adult. I briefly mentioned In Maggie Makes 3 a moment ago as a perfect example of when I was a kid. I think I appreciated that was a sweet thing that Homer did at the end of the episode. but watching back as an adult, it like really hits you hard. I don't even have kids. I imagine watching it as a parent, it probably makes you swell up even harder. And that type of connection, not only with the more adult humor, but the more adult feelings the show often makes us feel, I think really makes a big factor, a bigger impact kind of in that same age range. That's where you're starting to develop empathy and things of that nature.
Well, I think this is going to be a weird comparison, but go with me on it. A lot of people criticize early Beatles songs because they just say that it's popcorn pop, it's kind of surface level pop music, and that it doesn't compare to the stuff that they did several years later. But I've actually gone back and listened to their early stuff more closely now, and it's a lot more complex than you thought it was. And I think The Simpsons is like that. It's way more multidimensional. You want to dismiss it for people that are not fans of The Simpsons. You want to dismiss it and write it off because it's this edgy cartoon about this ridiculous father and his crazy family, and you just pass by it really quickly. But as you just did a great job of explaining with that example, it's a multidimensional thing. And not only that, but they constantly kind of achieve this balance between Homer being who we all know Homer to be, the goofiness, and also these other moments. He all the characters are more, at least the main ones, are more multidimensional than a lot of people give it credit for, right? So you can have these serious moments, and even now we're going into 30 seasons. Mm-hmm. I think these things have remained consistent. Somehow this group of people have stayed together and kept this thing consistent, and something that we keep wanting to watch. And I think that's really hard to do.
It's very rare. It's this magical connection that this group of people have, because I think we were talking about it possibly before the show started, but I think that as long as these voice actors are there to provide the life to these characters, the writers are still going to be there ready to keep giving them content. And it's that rare thing that after 30 seasons, key figures haven't just burnt out and left, or haven't just gotten tired of doing the same role. They all seem to genuinely enjoy doing what they do, and that makes for a really special work environment. And as it turns out, a very special show, because I think The Simpsons has affected in a different way. And I could very easily be biased here, obviously, but I truly feel like The Simpsons has an impact on culture that no other animated show has ever had on culture in general, on a broad scale. I mean, of course, they all make a dent going as far back as the Flintstones or even South Park or Family Guy. But I think that The Simpsons' sense of humor is almost entwined in a lot of entertainers, all the way from your AAA stars all the way down to us, meager indie podcasters who are, just trying to put out the best content we can. A lot of times I think that sense of humor you sense is, at least in some way, almost derivative of, but definitely inspired by The Simpsons a lot of the times.
Well, I think The Simpsons is literally unprecedented. And you guys know this, but either it just did or it's about to as it goes into its 30th season this fall. It's the longest running scripted show in television history. It
just passed Gunsmoke, just a few episodes. This was maybe a couple months back at this point.
Yeah, and so it does have one thing. Well, one thing it has in common with a show, Saturday Night Live, which gets to draw on current events week to week. So I think that's helpful because it allows them to have ongoing stuff, new fresh things to draw from. But it is unprecedented. I mean, it's the longest running show. It's had the same cast, and it's been remarkably consistent the entire run.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. That's a very, very good observation and a very good point. That it truly holds the title. And that, of course, I think because of the duration of the show, it affects different people at different times. And like a great example of this, not too long ago, I took the Whiz Kid out to lunch for his birthday, and we went to Hooters. Which, we used to go to Hooters all the time in like college and whatnot, so it was a little bit of almost like a nostalgia visit for that regard. But we're wearing our show's merchandise. It's like I have like a hoodie on. I don't know. We're wearing something that has our podcast logo on it. And the waitress, who's like this 18-year-old girl, recognizes it's The Simpsons, and we ask her, is like, "Oh, are you a fan of the show?" And I think her exact response was, No, not really, but I think my dad likes it.
Right. And that's probably a true statement.
That's right, we're old.
We're old as fuck. It's fine. No, it's it just shows that maybe the show doesn't have the same impact, and maybe it doesn't necessarily saturate through society as much as it once did. But even someone who considers themselves to not be a fan of the show recognizes the characters just by silhouette. So, I mean, that's the type of cultural impact I think that, makes a statement compared to other shows.
Well, I think, is it Bart or are there other cast members too that has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame? Isn't Bart or multiple cast members there?
I'm not positive on that, but I know
Right.
I've watched something about them doing their like handprint thing or whatever it is that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we've got a pretty great episode of the show to talk about today. We're discussing Homer the Clown, which originally aired on February 12th. I put 2018, but that's definitely not correct. It's February 12th, 1995. The chalkboard gag on this one is next time it could be me on the scaffolding, which feels a little bit dark, maybe a Merkin joke, I don't know. And the couch gag is a reverse effect where instead of the Simpsons rushing in to sit on the couch rushes in as independent cushions and assembles itself on top of the Simpsons before collapsing to the floor. Actually, really like this one. Can't remember if it's a repeat or not, but it made me chuckle either way.
How many repeats are there?
They repeat pretty often, honestly.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah, it's definitely
Especially
not
at this
in...
point.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where a lot of times we see a redo, but it makes the times when they don't feel even more special, and there's still several new ones per season.
They couldn't come up with 650 unique couch gags.
Well, and sometimes they purposely use some of the longer ones to like fill in time and things. Like anytime you see that line dancing circus entrance, that's a sign that the episode was probably running a little bit short.
Oh, interesting. That's a cool trivia bit.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, maybe that'll be at Texas Podocalypse when we do some trivia here in just a few short
We're giving
weeks.
away too many
Put a
answers
pin
for
in that one.
That's right. We're all getting together in 3 weeks, aren't we?
Yeah, we sure are, man. We'll have a good time down at Rita Rio's.
Yep.
It's
Austin,
one of
Texas.
those. Yeah, it'll be a good time. For now, we get into the episode, and it starts out like so many other Simpsons episodes start out. The Simpsons kids are watching TV. In this case, it's the Krusty the Clown show, and we see Krusty doing all sorts of clown shenanigans, including riding on a tiny bicycle that he eventually actually starts like taking. It's like the Russian stacking dolls where smaller and smaller bikes keep popping out, and then he swallows one, which I thought was funny when he signed off with a ching ching.
I want to say this because it's actually, full disclosure, it's been a little while since I've watched a number of Simpsons episodes. But what I forgot about it, and for people that don't realize this, network television, a half-hour show is actually 22 minutes of content, and that includes the intro and outro of the show. And I forgot how fast-paced and how many bits and jokes and great lines that they just rapid fire at you the entire episode in most episodes of The Simpsons, and this was no exception.
Yeah, we've referenced a chart that we use every once in a while, especially on our season finale shows, that actually breaks down the number of jokes per minute in The Simpsons season by season. And season 6 is one of the higher bars. It's not the most jokes per minute, but rapid fire is absolutely the way to put it, because they just come at you nonstop the entire time. Even a lot of times they're like background jokes that are barely acknowledged, but they're still hilarious.
Well, and as a fan of The Simpsons, and I'm just a huge fan and kind of a student of comedy in general, I watch for that. So I try to catch the things that most people will miss, and that's why I really enjoy watching a show like this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a big part of what we love to do as well. And yeah, I'm the same way. Regardless of what I'm watching, it's fun to kind of pick through and find Easter eggs and fun things like that.
Well, when you're watching, the best of the best pull off their craft, you can't help but just want to study it a little bit.
I agree. Yeah, no matter what it is, it's just really fascinating to watch people who are really good at what they do.
Well, in a show like this, if we're around 10 jokes per minute, and it's a 22-minute episode with credits, so you're averaging 220 jokes an episode, that's ridiculous.
It is. That's absurd.
Mathematically improbable, but they still somehow
ridiculous.
make it work. Yeah. So we see Krusty actually sign off on his show, and as the curtain drops, he just drops immediately out of character. He goes from being the smiling entertainer to the more depressed or maybe just mellow or not mellow. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. He's definitely not the zany character he is on screen. He immediately lights a cigarette. I love as he's lighting it, he actually uses a $100 bill.
Well, yeah, and actually just one small thing that you passed over is that he ends the bit on stage with the curtain up by eating the bike.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right. After he does the loop-de-loop, he tosses it up and swallows it.
And it makes the, I don't even know how to refer to it, but the little bell on your handlebars. Yeah,
that's great.
I like that throughout this episode, everyone points out how this is such a famous bit, and it's everyone's favorite bit, but like you've never seen it before.
Never seen it before.
No one's ever done this before.
Krusty is clearly, well, he's literally burning through some money because he lights his cigarette with a $100 bill, and he's talking to his, I guess, accountant or manager or something, and he's throwing out a lot of ideas as far as other ways to spend some cash.
Put $5,000 on the Lakers. Hire Kenny G to play for me in the elevator. My house is dirty. Buy me a clean one.
I particularly love that last one because there's many, many times where I've looked at the state of my house and it's just like, nope, fucking sell it. It's not worth it.
Did you send those 1,000 roses to B. Arthur's grave?
I love that the accountant tries to cut him off and explain that she's actually still alive.
I don't want to hear the end of any sentences.
So, unfortunately, this joke has somewhat aged due to the fact that B. Arthur has, in fact, passed away in the time since this joke was written. But at the time, she was very much alive and kicking whenever they wrote her into the script.
Well, and George Carlin.
George Carlin as well, yeah. That's actually a great reference to the 7 dirty words you can't say on TV or radio or whatever it was. I love George Carlin. I love the idea that Krusty gets in an argument over him, but then he just yells out, 10 grand.
Steve Martin on 4.
10 grand. And that's when we see Fat Tony, one of our favorite mobsters around Springfield, come into Krusty's office. He's got his henchman, of course, in tow, and he says, Krusty, with regards to the large wager you made in yesterday's horse race...
come on. How about letting me go double or nothing on the big opera tonight?
Who do you like?
The tenor.
Okay, but we're only letting the bet ride because you crack us so consistently up.
Which, how do you bet on an opera? I want to understand this world.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I love all of the gambling in this, jumping ahead when they're gambling on the Harlem Globetrotters. This game is rigged.
Why would you not bet on the Globetrotters?
Because the Generals were due.
The Generals are due, to be fair, absolutely. I love the line coming up where his agent is telling him that gambling is one of the, best things a man can do with his life if he's good at it. So great. But for now, it's Bill as he's listed in the script. Again, I think it's his finance guide.
It's his accountant.
His accountant. He's trying to get Krusty to save some money, but Krusty just refuses to do it. In fact, he lights an additional cigarette, this time with an original Superman Action Comics #1, which at the time that this episode was made was worth a mere $250,000. I mean, chump change if you really think about it, compared to its 2018 projected value of well over $1 million.
Jeez. Well, and we've already discussed how this episode's packed with jokes anyways, but I think in that very moment, a great cutaway would have been comic book store guy standing in the window, with a tear going down his face.
Just like the old Trail of Tears, commercials they had in the 90s where you just see the Native American crying with the litter.
Right.
Yeah, that would have been perfect. I agree. That would have been a great joke.
He senses something in the force and starts crying.
and actually, a personal piece of Simpsons-related trivia, he's my favorite character in the whole show. Comic book store guy.
What's his real name?
Ooh.
I was going to ask you that because I think I gave up trying to find out and I never did.
It's Jeff something. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Is that right?
I'm 99% positive of that. I know Patty Cakes from the Throwdown Thursday podcast would know, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
I mean, if not him, I like Disco Stew also.
Disco Stew. Yeah, that's absolutely
Right.
Jeff Albertson is his name.
Okay, I never knew that. Okay.
Yeah. They literally gave him a name so that nerds could have like a good Simpsons trivia question. And to be fair, that was legit one of the that was legit one of the questions that the last time Richie and I went and played Simpsons trivia, which we got like smoked on by this other table. It was ridiculous. But they one of the actual questions was, what is Comic Book Guy's real name?
Wow.
I still don't know if they knew everybody that was in that Treehouse of Horror episode. They were like right on the nose on that, and I find that quite odd.
I feel like they had a large enough group that maybe they were like hiding a cell phone in between like two of the girls in the middle or something like that. Like, it just seemed like, I mean, maybe they are just truly better fans than we are, but my God, some of the stuff they remembered is like so ridiculous. If we reviewed the episode yesterday, I might not remember that bit of trivia that they were getting.
So has Comic Book Store Guy had that name all along? Has that ever been revealed in an episode?
So far, it has not been revealed. Like, it will become revealed in a future episode, but that doesn't come for quite some time.
Supposed to say it once or something.
Yeah, I think they just literally just say it at the very end of an episode at one point. Like they're talking and somebody says, Jeff Albertson at the end or something like that. I don't actually remember, but we haven't gotten there on the podcast yet.
Got it. Okay.
So definitely not through the first 5.5 seasons.
Well, I don't know if you're going to get to it because you might be ready to move on, but there was the quick montage that they do of all the different products that he's lent his name to. And they do the advertisement for the Lady Krusty mustache removal.
Oh my God, yes, I love that. David Merkin had one note on that he regrets not making it a bloody lip. They were trying to be sensitive for the censors, and he says that was a mistake. They should have made it super bloody, if anything, more bloody than normal.
And I also liked the Krusty crowd control barrier.
The crowd control barrier, absolutely. But it's bad because those aren't selling, and neither is the new Lady Krusty line, which you would think with infomercials running 24 hours a day, they might get over.
Right.
So what do you think of the Lady Krusty mustache removal system now, Angelique?
It's crusterific, Johnny Unitas, but is my upper lip supposed to bleed like this?
Probably.
Krusty's accountant advises that at this rate, he's going to be broke in a month. And the only thing left to do is to open a clown college and train some regional Krusties.
You mean like that bozo Bonko the Clown?
I like that was the only thing that was left to be done.
Yeah.
They couldn't come up with just one more idea.
There was zero other options.
If he could burn that much stuff on a daily basis and still be surviving for a month, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Well, if he would just cut back on the condor egg omelets, it seems like that would do the trick.
Whoa. A man has his limits, Miles. A couple of those would be tasty right now.
I'll found the college tomorrow. And then we see Krusty light a third cigarette. This time it was with jewelry, a string of pearls. Yeah.
Which I didn't know was flammable, but I do now.
Also is not aware and now feel really worried because both Richie and I used to work in jewelry, so we may have sold some people just some like flame, anybody who lights a cigarette is at risk of like neck burns. Who would have thought? But Krusty may not be super excited to have to open a clown college, but Homer could not be more excited that it is new Billboard Day. I love this bit. I don't know why it's so funny, but he's just driving down the road and he realizes it must be the first of the month, new Billboard Day. And he just slams his brake in the middle of the road. The best part of this, it not only causes a traffic jam, but the car immediately behind Homer is actually one of those trucks that are used to transport cars. So this advantageous truck driver just opened up the back of the cart thing so that the cars would load into his vehicle, and then he's just like, well, I'll take that.
Finders keepers.
There you go. But Homer is just obsessed he reads billboards as if somebody who is really into comics would read comic books. He stops and he admires the
If they
detail
stopped on the
every
highway to
page.
read the comics.
If they stopped on the highway is the kicker. This year, give her English muffins.
Yeah, and I do like it that the last one where I think slams on his brakes and it causes a giant explosion.
Yes. Like a 20-car pileup that just turns into a fireball. Best in the West. It rhymes. And then I love when he sees the billboard for Krusty's Clown College. It was just you can't eat that.
Well, so shortly after that, it cuts to him sitting at the kitchen table. And I think this scene kind of encapsulates Homer perfectly. What you find out is that he can't resist, but he buys everything that's on every billboard he sees every single month.
He's actually at his work desk when he does that, if I remember correctly. So, like, he was on his way to work and bought
that's
all
what
this
it was.
crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that one of the things that is on there is just a big bag of MSG.
Yeah. That cracked me up.
So yeah, Homer's at work and he's kind of scoffing still at the idea of the advertisement having no effect on him, specifically the Clown College advertising having absolutely no effect on him. As he lays back and starts to daydream, we see that I think he's dreaming about sleeping, and then that dream starts dreaming about eating, if I remember, or maybe I flipped those. Either way, it immediately starts to be literally invaded by the billboard for the Krusty the Clown College. And just then, Lenny and Carl walk in with some grim news.
Hey, Homer, the section you're supposed to be monitoring is on fire.
As we're looking through his point of view, we see Lenny literally transform into a clown who starts to dance back and forth. We then see 4 additional clowns burst into the door, doing all sorts of fun antics, but just for a very brief moment, we see what's actually happening, and these cats are on fire, burning to death, but Homer is just, like, too invested in his fantasy.
Clowns are funny.
At dinner that night at the Simpsons' home, things continue to get weird for Homer as his daydreams continue. First of all, we actually see him basically making a sculpture of his mashed potatoes, which is actually a reference to the movie Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, in which one of the characters does this...
Third kind,
excuse me. One of the characters does this, except it's with the Devil's Tower in the movie, as opposed to what Homer is making, which is a circus tent.
Oh, see, I missed that reference.
I only caught it because of the commentary, not even gonna lie.
I only caught it because of my guidebook.
I really love it because as Homer's doing this, his family starts to transform into clowns, and particularly Marge as a clown is really, like, Marge's Krusty looks really fun. Like, I love that animation, but the whole family transforms into themselves, but as Krusty the Clown, and Homer is clearly being more affected than he'd like to admit as far as that advertisement goes.
Marge?
Yes, homie?
I think that's when she goes, do, do, do.
Yeah. That's it! You people have stood in my way long enough. I'm going to Clown College. Slam.
I don't think any of us expected him to say that.
That's actually one of my favorite lines from the entire episode. And also, it reminds me of, because like he makes this indictment that they're trying to keep him from enrolling. And it reminded me of, this may be out of sequence, but another episode where it's the episode where he's eating like this 20-foot long sandwich. And he declares to Marge, he declares to Marge that it was always his dream to do this. And then she corrects him and says, no, your live stream is such and such, and you already did that. I don't remember, I don't remember the details, but it reminded me of that.
There's also another episode in which Homer goes to college, and he declares at the dinner table he's going to college, and Bart replies, barber or clown? Fun little connection with that as well. But I do really appreciate that Bart just kind of states the obvious here, but it's very funny. No one probably did expect him to say that. It literally came out of nowhere.
I would love to. I'd love to see a list throughout the entire life of The Simpsons of how many life dreams Homer declares.
That would be a lot of fun. I'm sure somebody has done that, probably on one of the mini Simpsons fan sites. Hopefully that's already in existence, because that's a tedious project right there.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, he's an amazing guy. I mean, a lot of people, when they achieve their dreams, they can't find a new one, but Homer can constantly find a new dream. I mean, you got to give him some credit there.
That's true. We are undermining him, but for now, it's his first day of Clown College. I love as he's getting ready, Marge is complaining that he's not holding still and he needs to quit squirming. And as he's very clearly squirming, we hear him say, I am holding still. I am squirming. Bart is not really impressed with what his dad's doing right here. He doesn't have a lot of faith that he's going to just be able to go around and pretend to be Krusty. It's sacrilege. He's a one and only. I mean, he invented the pie fight, the pratfall, the seltzer bottle, as far as I know.
Yeah, Dad, it was bad enough when you tried to pass yourself off as Tony... excuse me. Yeah, Dad, it was bad enough when you tried to pass yourself off as Tom Bosley, but Krusty?
You weren't complaining when I got this close to Chachi.
What's a Chachi?
And that, of course, is a reference. Tom Bosley was the dad on Happy Days, and Chachi was a character so popular that he eventually got a spin-off show. I think it was Joni Loves Chachi, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely correct. And I wonder, even in 1995, who picked up the Tom Bosley
Yeah,
reference.
that's fairly dated even at that point, and now very dated. But to be fair, Happy Days was playing on Nick at Night during this time, so maybe, just maybe, there's some crossover fans watching. That would have actually been pretty trippy if you were just watching Happy Days for the first time because it's being replayed on Nick at Night, and then they make this Tom Bosley reference, and you're like, holy shit, I know these people.
I actually know what he's talking about.
Because there are so many jokes in The Simpsons that we would not get. We probably miss a ton as is, and even with Googling them all, trying to figure out what the joke was, sometimes it's just like, yeah, I don't know. They were clearly, they made a joke, and it was probably funny at the time, but I cannot figure out what the hell they were talking about.
Well, at 200 plus per episode, I mean, what are we probably getting? Maybe 40 or 45% of them?
At best, probably. We see that Homer is actually off to the Krusty Clown College, and it has a sign under it saying, formerly the Willie Nelson's house. Formerly Willie Nelson's house is how a human would say that. I love this is actually a reference because at the time, Willie Nelson had just been busted for like massive back taxes that he owed. He did eventually settle, but at the time that this episode was created,
Was it for $48?
his property had been seized. It was not. It was for a little bit more than $48. Just a smidge over that. Krusty declares that there can only be one Krusty in each territory, so they have to go through and make sure that everyone's from a spread out region. I love that as we're going through, you see a person say Georgia, you see somebody who's clearly a Texan say Texas, and then immediately after that, another cowboy-esque that's probably Texan, listed as Texan 2 in the script, and he replies,
Brooklyn.
We also have Russia, New Hampshire, and Homer, who replies, Homer.
He's trying really hard.
Not altogether incorrect.
The Clown College classes start off with the baggy pants.
This is my second favorite scene in the episode.
Okay, we'll start off with the baggy... What? Those are supposed to be baggy pants. Baggy!
Ooh, I've never had a pair of pants that fit this well in my life.
Okay, memorize these funny place names. Walla Walla, Keokuk, Cucamonga, Seattle.
Stop it. You're killing me. Seattle. So we get Homer is progressing not so well, but he's getting there with his Clown College classes. However, when it's time to learn the spin cycle fantastique trick, as it is a great piece of buffoonery, but it's not easy to pull off, and Homer finds it to be quite the struggle. The first time through, he just drives literally straight through the loop-de-loop. It just crashes through the wall.
Not Homer's fault.
I feel like that was bad construction. Yeah, I'll give him that one. We then, however, get a second run. First we actually get a class on what to do when the wealthy dowager comes into the party.
Now, when the wealthy dowager comes in, the party's over, right? Wrong! Slap. Well, pie slap.
But it's very, very forceful to the point that Homer even takes the note, kill wealthy dowager.
Well, her head hits the wall, and you even see the wall get cracks in it when she hits it. Like, Krusty hit her pretty damn hard.
She kind of goes into the sheetrock.
Yeah.
Which, for some reason, I find broken sheetrock really funny. I don't know why that's it just is. Anytime the sheetrock breaks, it's funny.
Well, and it's a really fun thing to see animated for some reason. Like, maybe that contributes to the humor, but it's something you don't see a lot in TV shows.
Well, I bet they thought, like, we'll just have him hit her in the face, and she just, like, falls back, and she's still in front of the wall, and they're like, oh, that's not funny. Then they animate her, like, going into the wall, but it's like, well, there's got to be a reaction when she hits the wall. If she just hits the wall, it doesn't make any sense. So then they feel like she can stick to the wall if they have the cracks appear.
Well, see, that's the genius of the nuance of the joke, is that most cartoons would send her through the wall, which is funny, but the nuance of the joke is that she doesn't. She just cracks the sheetrock.
And it looks really painful.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing is there's more pain implied by just cracking the sheetrock than going all the way through the wall.
I agree completely.
It's less cartoonish and more realistic, and there's that weird balance in that joke right there.
Yeah, and doing it in this art form and in a cartoon setting makes it just that much funnier. Absolutely.
Well, and then the juxtaposition, of course, that she's dressed up in a fancy dress with pearls and he's in a clown costume.
Which hopefully she's staying away from open flames.
Yes.
Right.
We then see Homer's second attempt at the spin cycle, and this time it looks like things are going a little bit better until his pants get caught in the tiny wheels, and it pulls him down so that he's basically naked trying to attempt this loop-de-loop. Still doesn't make it, of course. This gets a big laugh. This always gets a big laugh from pretty much everyone, according to the DVD commentary, and David Merkin wanted to take a moment to give some advice to some young or new comedy writers. You see, everyone loves a bare ass.
Excellent.
I love the next bit, too, with Krusty, who's back in class with the next lesson.
These Krusty brand balloons are $3 each, but get a cheap one and what happens? It goes off, takes out the eyeballs of every kid in the room. What's that going to cost you? Hey, Bill, what did that cost us?
It's the money you spend up front to prevent these little mini tragedies. Yeah, absolutely. So we see Homer actually donning the Krusty the Clown getup, and he looks exceptionally close to how Krusty looks. It's bizarre almost, with the exception...
Well, he tried the spin cycle trick one more time.
Oh, you are so right. I missed the spin cycle the last time. Richie, and you go ahead and take it away, sir.
It looks like he's going to achieve his new life dream and his goal right now. He's hitting the ramp. He's going to go up, except he's going at, I guess, the wrong speed, or maybe he's going too fast. I don't know, but the whole
I think he's just
kinda,
too heavy for the setup, and it just causes
the ramp just kind of clamps around his body.
It like cinches down. It's great.
And he has to walk off like hunched over while it's wrapped around his body.
But that's okay. Clearly, this
he's
was
getting better each time.
Yeah, he's improving, and it was clearly enough that he's at least able to start getting gigs as Krusty, because he dons the Krusty the Clown makeup, and he looks exactly like Krusty, with the exception of that tiny little green tuft of hair. And you may have noticed, and we may have even talked about briefly in the past, that Krusty and Homer really do look very similar to each other. In fact, one of the early ideas and early concepts of the show when The Simpsons was being created was Homer and Krusty were actually going to be the same character. Homer was going to basically moonlight as Krusty the Clown. He would still be the somewhat buffoon of a father who had the regular 9-to-5 job, but on the side, he'd be acting as Krusty. And the joke there was that Bart would both essentially kind of not respect his father, while his idol was Krusty the Clown, who was also his father, and that was going to be a big part of the Simpsons series. That eventually went away, but the character model still stayed relatively close to the same, and that's a big part of why this episode works so well, is because the character models were already pretty close to each other to begin with.
Wow, that's interesting. And the other thing is that at the time when he puts all the stuff on, Bart and Lisa switched their attitude. Before they didn't like it, and now they really like it and they're excited about it.
Yeah, it's like they've completely changed their minds on how they view their father in this new position.
I would like to point out that my guidebook, The Simpsons: A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family, we talk about every week about how it has a section called The Stuff You May Have Missed. literally the last one for this episode. The stuff you may have missed. Homer and Krusty can be told apart by the tops of their heads. Krusty has a tuft of green hair where Homer only has his regular two. And I thought it was really funny that the guidebook had to point that out for this episode.
That seems like it's stretching for content at this point.
Well, especially with the last scene. It just like when I read that after I watched the episode, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe they put that in here.
But yeah, to your point of the kids looking up to their dad now, and they even apologize. Bart even says, "I'm sorry I doubted you." And I love Lisa. If there had to be a bastardized version of Krusty, I'm glad it's you.
Textbook backhanded compliment.
Thanks, honey. Bank shot.
And we see Homer actually bounces his Flowers seltzer spray off of Bart's cheek and onto Lisa, which really impresses the kids.
Really impresses me, too.
Well, that's good aim, Dad.
Well, it was my major. I want to know what the other majors are.
I would love to know what the other majors are. Surely the bike one has to be one. You've got the probably juggling. You got the flower, obviously. Pies in the face, maybe. Funny wordplay.
It's got to be balloon animals.
Balloon animals definitely has to be on there. Yeah, this is. I feel like we're selling this college. Maybe we can get a sponsorship. For now, though, Krusty addresses his graduates on their graduation day.
Welcome to the noble family of skilled crustaceans. You will now go back to your hometowns and do kids' parties, swap meets, and all other piddling crap I couldn't touch with a 10-foot clown pole. Now, come and get your sheepskins.
And I love as everybody walks by to get their diploma or get their to graduate, Krusty is shaking their hands, and of course he has a buzzer that he's shocking everyone with. Homer, though, is he grabs his diploma and is like, got it, no shocks for me.
Oh, yeah?
And we see Krusty chase down Homer and essentially assaults him with his hand buzzer, or his joy buzzer, as they're calling it. And that's actually what brings us to the end of our very first act. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll be right back for Act 2 of Homer the Clown. Well, kids, that is actually going to do it for this week. This great conversation with Toph from the Gravity Beard podcast. Once again, just went a little longer than expected, so we're going to have to divide this one up in two. But don't you worry. Richie the Whiz Kid, Toph, and myself will all be back again next week to dive into Acts 2 and 3. Until next time, make sure you follow Richie the Whiz Kid at @thewiz_kid23. Follow Toph from the Gravity Beard podcast at Gravity Beard, and you can follow me at Mr. Most Days Off. Of course, follow our show at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY. Toph, Richie, and I look forward to being back again with you next week for the conclusion of Homer the Clown. Until next time, be cromulent to each other.
Rising from the depths of a state called Michigan, two inebriated dorks prepare their plan for intergalactic domination. Mixing their extensive knowledge of geek culture with their insatiable thirst for alcohol, these two man-children bring you a show like you've never heard before. They will tell you tales from faraway lands and have you questioning their taste in beer. But make no mistake, friend, for the best coverage of your favorite comics, films, and TV shows, there's no better source for you to get your fix. So listen up, strap in, and prepare yourself as Jake and Tom conquer the world.